What's up, coders? So, chances are, if you are utilizing Postman, you are underutilizing it. There are a lot of intermediate and advanced features and just general organizational strategies that you're not taking advantage of to help streamline your workflow. So, some of the things we can actually do with Postman include stuff like automated API testing and even randomized data generation through their Faker.js integration, which, if you didn't know, is a really cool thing you can do to help seed your database with a lot of randomized data at the beginning of a new project. That will not be a part of this video, so if you do want to see more of that, go ahead and like and subscribe this, so that way you'll be notified to the next video in this series. But for today, we'll take a look at just general organizational strategies. So without further ado, let's go ahead and pop over into Postman. One of the biggest mistakes I had when I first started utilizing Postman was not taking advantage of their workspaces feature. I just dumped all of my collections into one massive cosmic gumbo of of collections. Everything just intermingled, and so I had personal projects, I had organizational work projects, I had student demonstrations, I had just student projects, all intertwined, and it was just really messy and cluttered, and it was just a bad organizational strategy. So one thing that I did that really helped just kind of clean up Postman and made me want to utilize it more, just basically using like super folders, workspaces. So if that kind of helped you get a better idea of how you can compartmentalize things, my workspaces, which we see highlighted here, that's for all of my personal projects. They stay self-contained within that workspace. Team workspace, same thing, but for my organization, for work. Students, for students' labs, if they want me to look over a project of theirs, if they need me to debug something, that's what that's for. And demonstrations, that is just my general day-to-day one-off random stuff, So I have everything very nicely compartmentalized. And in fact, for this YouTube video series and any subsequent projects I do, not necessarily even demonstrations of Postman features, I'm going to create a new workspace for that even. It's not quite personal projects, it's not quite work, and it's not quite like day-to-day demos, so it really deserves its own separate workspace. Summary is this is a workspace for all YouTube demo collections. Oh man, I am just as bad as coming up with variable names as I am with strings and descriptions. So we'll just go with that for now. So I'm going to create this workspace, and this is a self-contained area for collections only for my YouTube demos. So within here, what's a collection? Well, it can be kind of a loosely defined term as just a series of requests, but that's a bad explanation. So for me, a collection is just a project. It is a series of requests dealing with one specific project. If you have a Git repo for it, you should really have a specific Postman and distinct Postman collection for it. So we will do that. I have a demonstration blog lab that I'm using, just a little API, and it has a few routes on it. It's got some authentication routes, it has some API routes, and the API routes all require some authentication status. So we can tap into some really cool features of Postman with that. But let's go ahead and create this collection. So I'm going to say blog demo. We will roll with that. Now, one of the interesting things that I like to do, and I haven't really seen a whole lot of other people doing it, so I don't know if it's just my crazy strategy or if I just haven't seen a lot of people going into their personal Postman strategies, but I like to organize my folders within my collection corresponding with my API route paths. So instead of just having a bunch of loose requests at a top level, I will make folders just mirroring my API path. For instance, my application has two root paths. It has a /API path for API routes and a /auth path for auth routes. So I'm going to go ahead and create those two folders. Within my API routes, I have several blog routes. So I have a nested route structure. So if that falls under the umbrella of /API/blogs, I will name this subfolder /blogs to designate that stacked relationship. And so instead of having, a myriad of requests just hanging out at the top level, everything is kind of compartmentalized. We've moved everything around into folders where they follow their, code, their routes themselves on a pretty much one-to-one structure, which makes for a really nice translation if I need to just quickly reference something and jump back and forth between my, tests and my routes. So just as how I've defined the folders too, I will also make my requests mirror their paths when it is appropriate to do so. And that's usually the case most of the time. So if I need to make a post request that's a login, well, if the whole request path is /auth/login in my code, I'm going to name the request just /login by itself. And I've made it a post. And so here it reads out as /auth/login. It's a post request. So it makes sense to me exactly and immediately what this is supposed to be. Yeah. And so let's go ahead and get that typed. Now, I'm not going to be talking about environment variables in this, but I will be going into collection variables potentially to show how we can expedite some automation. But for now, let me go ahead and just craft this login. And just as a quick little introduction of what's to come with environment variables, well, I've hard-coded my URL here, and this is my local dev server. But what happens if I decide to deploy this application and a friend texts me and says, "Hey Andrew, your application, I can't log in." I'm like, well, that sounds pretty problematic. Let me go debug that. If I wanted to debug a bunch of stuff on all of my routes, that's a lot of manual changing I have to do. But if I compartmentalized this as a variable named like URL or something, then I could set up a local environment where URL equals localhost :3000, and I could set up a production environment where URL equaled, Andrew's goofy app.andrewsite.com. And that way I can just one-click toggle, and that way everything would be up to date with my production URL. I could instantaneously shift from development testing to production or staging or whatever environment you would like. So that's a cool little feature that we can enable with environment variables. But for now, let's go ahead and establish this. I only have a couple user accounts that I created on this API using some JSON placeholder data, and I always forget them because, it's just randomized data. They're not like famous people or anything. The password, you will only see asterisks, but I see it as Hunter2, so that's what's being typed in here. If you get that reference, go ahead and drop it in the comments if you know where that's from. And for now, I'll go ahead and I will copy, one of the emails, because yet again, I have the attention span and memory of a goldfish. So philiploishka79@hotmail.com, one of the fake accounts I've created. And cool, my API has validated that, hey, this person does exist in the database, they're a valid user, and it has granted me a token for them. So I need to use this token for pretty much all of my blog requests. I haven't written my blog requests yet, I've only made my login here, but let's go ahead and start getting some of those requests made. Now, like I said, I typically tend to follow conventions of, my route structure. If it's a GET request and it's under the /API/blogs and it has nothing in the path after that, mentally, I know that I'm trying to get all items of that resource. And so in my own personal organization, I will, do this. But if I'm working with other people, I might explicitly title this, get all blogs or something like that. So really, it depends, but this is how I tend to structure it in my own personal development, and it really makes for a good, consistent environment. So now, if I attempt to get blogs without my authorization, we get 401 unauthorized, and that's the same workflow if I try to get one single blog. So I don't have an ID off the top of my head, but I'll try to get, a blog with the ID of pizza. I'm using UUIDs, so I guess I have to get all of them first to get an ID, and then I can get that. But yeah, let me go ahead and rename this. And what I'm going to do here is I will put a colon and an ID here to demonstrate that, hey, this is kind of a placeholder variable for an ID that should be placed within here. And so that's going to signify like, hey, this is getting all blogs and this is getting a specific blog. And like I've said, I do this because this mirrors how I have my API set up, how I have my backend structured. This is, following Express.js's conventions, but this will work for whatever API you have, regardless of what language or framework you are developing with. So I'm just using that as the placeholder variable, designating that, hey, I'm getting one item here. But this too requires authentication, or I guess I may have actually removed that in the code. So I might mark this as unauthenticated, and I might have this as requires auth. Sometimes I do this, sometimes I don't, but it does let me know that, if I go decide to, integrate testing later, I probably will duplicate this and have a test where it does have authentication, so everything should be good, and I will remove the authentication and make sure it fails as expected. And so I'll kind of double up on that, which is why I've got that little extra tidbit here. But if I want to, let me make a post as well. I actually forget what I coded as it requiring, so we'll go ahead. I think it's just content. I think it derives the user ID from the token, and it's a pretty small database, pretty small table, so we'll leave it that way. Now, I did speak about randomized data generation, and I did talk about how we can use the collection runner to create hundreds, if not thousands, of entries in your database within the span of a few seconds. We'll be doing that in the next video, but here's just a quick introduction into how it can be done on a manual basis. So Postman has Faker.js integrated, which is a library for producing randomized data. So we can use variables. We can interpolate them anywhere in Postman with mustache syntax, double sets of curly braces, and the Faker.js integration is triggered with the $ variable name. That's Postman's syntax for their global variables for Faker.js. And so here I'm going to use the random, and I mean you can see how much stuff there is here. I probably should use something like random lorem sentence or paragraph or sentences, but I kind of like the random phrase because they're goofy, like tech jargon. Maybe it's random catchphrase. No, random phrase is definitely the goofy tech jargon. We'll go with that. So if I try to make a post request, and this is where I start losing out on some of the distinction, I think. A post to /API/blogs, we would know if we're keeping in accordance with RESTful principles that, yes, if I'm making a post request to an API endpoint just bare by itself, then I am creating that resource. You might choose, like I said, to additionally say like this, you might name this get all blogs, you might name this get one blog, you might name this create one blog. So I really, really, really heartily suggest keeping the folder structure that I have, because it's a really great organizational strategy, but naming the requests themselves is wholly up to you. My only suggestion is that you remain consistent with it. It's going to be a lot easier for you to work with if you remain consistent. But let me go ahead and close out of any unused tabs. Big recommendation as well. Just like with coding, if you're done with it, shut it down. Quit, keeping it open. Get rid of that visual clutter. Doesn't help you any. It just gets in the way. So I'm going to try to make a request. I have no authorization, and so my backend is telling me I have no auth token. Well, crud. That means I have to provide authorization on all three of these, because all of these do require auth. Or in theory, I just forgot to apply that authentication check to it, but for the intent of the video, I did require auth for it. So if I want to add authorization to this request, Postman has a really handy auth tab. And we could actually set up the headers manually. Like I could say key authorization value bearer and then paste the token, but that's literally what this does in an easier format. So I can come over here, paste that token I just got from my login, and now I can successfully make that request. And if you take note here, when I pasted that in and set this to bearer token, we went from 8 headers to 9. So like I said, it's just automatically applying authorization, bearer, and our token here. It's just a little easier for us to copy paste that inside of here. But I now have the ability to create this new blog. Now let's say I wanted to go see what I just created. Well, guess what? That also requires an auth token. So I guess I have to go to auth and then change that from inherit auth to bearer token, and then go either log back in again or go copy paste, my token from another request. And that just starts getting so messy so quickly. So instead, let's look at that default. I mentioned that word inherit. And let's look at what it's deriving that meaning as. It's inheriting authentication from its parent. What is the parent of this request? The blogs folder. What is the parent of that? Well, if we look at the auth for that folder, we don't have to apply auth on a route by route basis. We can apply it by a folder basis. Well, what is the blogs folder doing? It's inheriting auth from its parent. Oh, well, what's its parent? The API folder. What's that doing? Oh, inheriting from its own parent. And what's its parent? Oh, well, it's the whole freaking collection. And guess what the first tab is when you look at a collection? Authentication. So we can say that every request within blog demo, unless otherwise specified, will inherit what the collection establishes. So we can, at this top level, whoops, I grabbed the ID, whereas I need to grab my token. Oh, and that little contacts menu, that's shining some light on where we're going next. So I can paste my token here, save my collection, close out of this, not using it anymore. And I'm going to change my post request here to inherit auth from parent. So I no longer am manually setting up my token here, but we see now it's using that bearer token from collection blog demo. So everything by default, uses that inherited authorization, property. So since I established that at blog demo, everything downstream will have that automatically applied. That header will get added to every request automatically. Now, if you didn't want that being sent explicitly on some requests, you can actually go and select no auth, but depending on how you have your API structured, usually doesn't matter. And I find it way easier to set it at the collection and have everything include an additional header and just remove it as necessary. So I can go ahead and make a new post request. And if I try to get all blogs, we remember that, oh no, we got no auth token. Well, crud. But if we take a look over here, it still has the default inherit all from parent, and it's using the bearer token from collection blog demo. So if I run this again, there we go. We now see all of our blogs. And these are the faker.js goofy little random phrases variable that I was using. Just a bunch of random tech jargon garbage that makes 0 sense whatever, but it's pretty fun to have as test data for like blog posts or like, you know, Twitter posts, etc., whatever application you're working on. So I really like using that. It just brightens my spirits whenever I see it. So what if I decided to log in as a different user? What if I wanted to test what things are like from an admin perspective? Or what if I just had short-lived tokens or something? What if my tokens only lasted like 5 minutes? It would have been pretty cumbersome to go and copy-paste that token on every request. And it is a little easier. Oh, there goes my power again. You've got to be kidding me. Sorry, I'm utilizing a UPS, but oh my goodness, I hope this lasts through the video. We'll hope that's not too annoying. I'll lower my mic and move a little closer. Okay, so what we'll do here is, you know, all we have to do is log back in, and we paste this token here once, and it's set for everything. But still, it's a little annoying to have to do that. So we can make this a little more automated. We can set, oh, there we go, power's back on. Goodness gracious. Sorry about that. Oh man. Chaos. The weather has been crazy today. So we can set a collection level variable. We can create a variable just like how the authorization is available for everything here. We can create something that is just like a programmatic variable. I can create a variable named token or spaghetti, what have you, and it's going to be available, you know, let's leave it spaghetti. I'm going to create this variable spaghetti. That's going to act as my token. I can even paste, well, I have that UUID on my clipboard, so we'll leave this empty. Now, I said that I can use a variable everywhere, including as authorization. Sorry, I'm so used to using token that I'll move it here. And spaghetti, if we hover over it, you know, we see that the color turned from red to orange once it was recognized. If we hover over it, we get this C designating that it is a collection level variable. I guess I can't hover over it, it's very elusive. We don't see an initial value because I didn't give it one, and we don't see a current value because it currently doesn't have one. But it does mean that wherever I set the variable spaghetti, it's going to use that as our token. And so, if I were to, oh, and I think I also have a GET request called hello. That bounces some information about me from my token. So let me actually go ahead and look at that. I think it's called API hello or API welcome. Authorization, it's sending the token via the parent. I have no route there. Oops. I have no route there either. No, man. Let's see. I might not actually have that route coded. That may have been something I thought about. So hang on a second and we'll get one up. All right. So I added in an API hello route, just a GET request that sends the token and bounce back some information. Let's see. So I don't have that auth token anymore, remembering that I created that spaghetti variable but didn't initialize a value. So I could copy paste a token after manually logging in again, but man, I'm tired of pasting that token over and over and over again. It's getting really cumbersome. So instead of that, we're going to be taking in advantage of something we'll be using more in some later videos. And that is going to be the tests section. So tests are something that run after a request has been made. And you have access to both the request and the response objects. And you can use that to run, tests with the Mocha library. You can run assertions to make sure that everything's going through as you expect. You can validate that, the request body has the correct incoming data and the response is providing the correct data back. You can make sure you're sending out the correct status code. You can even check to see if your response time is less than a set amount of milliseconds. And so you can kind of get an early red flag in the event one of your services has a slow API response. So it's really handy, but that is stuff for a different video. However, you can look at the snippets they've got here, which is really, really handy because they do have those tests established. They even have code snippets here. I don't want to set an environment variable. I want to set a collection variable. So the Postman library has a collection variables object with a set function that lets me, it treats it basically like the JavaScript map data set, the data structure, where you use a key value pair, you set it with the key and provide it the value. So here I'll get spaghetti. That's the key, that's that collection variable I want to set. And the value, whenever I log in, it sends the token back in the response. So if I can get the response body dot token, that should be this string here, and I can set the spaghetti variable to that. So here, I'm not going to run any tests per se, but I will just go ahead and destructure that out. So we have access to it via Postman, and it's got the response object, which has a .json function that parses everything for us. So that returns everything as the nice JSON parsed object, and I just destructure token out of this. And now I can set spaghetti to that token. So I know that's kind of been a weird and roundabout structure, but here I was able to just press the login button. Let me close out of everything right now, except for the hello. Let's look at the variable. Ooh. So here I'm looking at spaghetti, and it now has a token built into it. So I was able to log in and have it give me that token, and we were able to just press the button and it sets it automatically in the background. So now if you had short-lived tokens for some reason, or if you wanted to test out everything under the scope of a new user, well, thankfully, you have the ability to very quickly establish that just by pressing the login button now. So if I run API hello now, it's going to say hello undefined, and this was that quick route that I just ran. Oh, crud. Let me go fix that. One sec. All right, so I never included the email when I signed the tokens, so thankfully this gives me an opportunity to log back in again, which assigns us a brand new token automatically. And now when I hit up API hello, there we go. There it is, deriving that information from the token. Yeehaw. What if I decide to log in as the only other user that I've got on my application? Well, I have to go copy his email address. And thankfully, yet again, he's logging in with the same password, Hunter2, which yet again shows up as just asterisks on your screen, but if you do get that reference, go ahead and leave a comment for it. And I have a new token now. Now, just for final confirmation that that actually did apply, in the workflow of things, I log in here, I get a token in the response. This test at the end runs after the response, and it grabs the token out of it, sets it to the collection variable spaghetti, which is located where? That's the collection variable, so it's at the highest scope. And the collection itself says that everything downstream, if it inherits authentication, will use a bearer token with the spaghetti variable. And so, just by logging in, it sets that. Anything that inherits will now have that updated token. So therefore, if I rerun this request, I will no longer be Philip Loishka, but instead I will be willkessler46@gmail.com. And there we have it. So, those are just a few of the intermediate features of Postman, organizing stuff, via workspaces and folders, and two, using collection variables and tests and inherited authentication to really kind of streamline your workflow. Really great productivity boosts. So if you want to see some more of the testing features and some more of the advanced stuff, go ahead and subscribe, and I will see you in the next iteration.